Well, it's a little hard to imagine that we are now in our 6th year of our current format, where much of our meeting is centered around the Bible reading for the week. So under treasures, we're going to have a talk, we have gems, and we have Bible reading, all from Numbers chapters 9 and 10. And then for our field ministry, this week, all 3 of our students are going to have parts that focus on the memorial invitation. And sure enough, here in our Bible reading, we have instructions for the Passover, which preceded the memorial. And here we are less than 3 weeks away from the memorial. So that's very good timing. Then when we get to our Christian living part, we're going to continue this idea that we start with, that Jehovah is leading his people. And we're going to see that particularly in connection with the recent changes that have happened in Bethels around the world. So we're going to start with our treasure section, and Brother Andrew Latchman is going to get us into this idea of how Jehovah leads his people. Brother Latchman?
What would you say if someone told you that you don't need to be part of an organization to worship God? God will lead you individually. Well, very likely you would want to share with that person the scriptures that show that Christians should be organized, that they should be led by Jehovah and receive spiritual food as a group. We're proud to be part of a people that is led by Jehovah. But at times we may need to remind ourselves how Jehovah leads his people. Why is that? Well, what if, for example, we receive direction through Jehovah's organization that is difficult to understand? Maybe we don't know the reason for it. Might we wonder whether it's just a personal opinion of someone taking the lead? Or what if we receive direction that seems to come very quickly? Maybe the timing is inconvenient for us. Might we wonder that maybe those taking the lead are not thinking this through, thinking about how it will affect people? Or what about if we receive very pointed counsel from an elder that we know very well? Might we be inclined to think about all the imperfections of that brother, and should he really be telling me about this or telling me what to do? In all these cases and situations like this, we need to remind ourselves how Jehovah leads his people so that we can readily obey. So we can learn 3 lessons from this week's Bible reading from how Jehovah led his people in the camp of Israel that will help us with these very situations today. Let's start with our first lesson in Numbers chapter 9, verses 17 and 18. Please turn there to Numbers chapter 9. And starting in verse 17, let's look for the way Jehovah provided evidence that he was the one leading his people. Jehovah provided evidence that he was leading his people. Verse 17, it says, "Whenever the cloud lifted from the tent, the Israelites would promptly depart. And in the place where the cloud would remain, there is where the Israelites would encamp. At the order of Jehovah, the Israelites would depart, and at the order of Jehovah, they would encamp. As long as the cloud remained over the tabernacle, they would remain encamped." So in the camp of Israel, Jehovah provided visible evidence, this miraculous pillar of cloud, and at night it was an appearance of fire that made it clear that Jehovah was the one directing his people, telling them where they should go and when they should move. Now, how can that be helpful to us? Well, today, Jehovah also provides evidence that he is the one leading his people. And it can help us to remind ourselves of that evidence, remind ourselves that this is not an organization of men, but it's an organization that is led by Jehovah through the men he's appointed. For example, the governing body acts as the faithful and discreet slave as prophesied by Jesus. And although they're not inspired or infallible, they are clearly being led by Jehovah's Spirit. Just think of all of the spiritual enlightenment that has been released from 1919 onward, understanding of Bible prophecy. Jehovah is leading his people. Think about the prospering of the preaching work. Despite opposition in many countries, the preaching of the good news of the kingdom continues and expands. The angels are clearly helping. Jehovah is leading that work. And when many religions today are adjusting their beliefs to accommodate public opinion or to yield to popular ideas, Jehovah's people are sticking close to God's word, the Bible. So that proves, doesn't it, that it's not personal opinion that is guiding God's people, but it is Jehovah himself and his word that is guiding them. So when we find changes difficult to understand, let's remind ourselves of the evidence Jehovah provides, that he is the one leading his people, that even if we don't understand it now, we know Jehovah's direction is always for the best, and it is really not the opinion of men, but it is Jehovah's will being done. What's the second lesson we can learn from the camp of Israel? If we look a little further down in Numbers 9 to verses 21 and 22, notice the timing Jehovah may choose could seem inconvenient to humans. Let's notice the timing there in verse 21. It says, sometimes the cloud would remain only from evening until morning, and when the cloud lifted in the morning, they would depart. Whether it was day or night when the cloud lifted, they would depart. Whether it was 2 days, a month, or longer, as long as the cloud stayed over the tabernacle, the Israelites remained encamped and would not depart. But when it lifted, they would depart. You notice the timing that could be involved here, just staying in one place from evening until morning? What would that be like in the camp? That you set up your tent, you set up your family, and then the next morning you have to pack it all up again? Or how about at night? Why would Jehovah direct the camp to move at night instead of waiting until the morning? Getting the children together, the animals, packing up all of the things without the aid of daylight. Was that just a rash decision? Well, no, Jehovah would do that for their benefit. It must have been the best decision, but we don't know why. Maybe Jehovah saw the movement of enemy camps. We don't know. But the point we can benefit from is that when Jehovah's timing might seem inconvenient, it's still Jehovah's timing. It's still for the best. So that can help us when the timing of decisions seem to be moving quicker than we would expect. In fact, we receive food at the proper time often and updates from the governing body through JW broadcasting. And that is one of the ways you receive this help. And we can see that in our picture that is shown in our meeting workbook. Here is Brother Lett in the JW broadcasting studio. And that's an arrangement where the governing body uses God's word to share with us comfort and guidance just when we need it. In fact, this picture comes from the 2020 governing body update number 1. If we can think back about a year ago when that came out, what big changes were happening in how we accomplished our spiritual routine. We adjusted our ministry, not going door to door, not meeting in person. And those changes may have felt overwhelming, right? So many things happening all at once. And we might have wondered if this was really the best decision. It might have crossed our mind. But looking back, aren't we convinced that that was Jehovah directing his people? Yes, just like in the nation of Israel, in the camp there, even when the timing might seem inconvenient, it might seem sudden, Jehovah's the one leading, and we want to trust that we need to obey Jehovah quickly because we need that direction, even though it feels sudden. And in the scripture in verse 22, it says it could be a longer time that they stayed in one place, a month or longer. Well, looking to the future, we might think of some times when we might be waiting for a change to happen. Maybe regarding the pandemic, we're waiting to go back to normal in some of our spiritual activities. You might be wondering, people around me, my work job or organizations in my area are opening up their activities. What will happen to our spiritual activities? It might seem like it's taking too long to us sometimes. But again, whether it was 2 days, a month, or longer, it was still Jehovah's will, and he knew the best way to care for his people. So we want to trust, even if we wait for a change, Jehovah's timing is always best. Our third lesson is in Numbers chapter 10, looking at verse 8, and it's the choice of how Jehovah conveyed his direction. Let's look at that. Numbers 10, verse 8. How did Jehovah choose to give direction? It says, Aaron's sons, the priests, should blow the trumpets, and the use of them will serve as a lasting statute for you throughout your generations. Now, what were these trumpets doing? Well, in verse 5, it says, when you sound a fluctuating trumpet blast, the camps of those to the east should depart. When you sound a fluctuating trumpet blast a second time, the camps of those to the south should depart. They should sound the trumpet blasts in this way each time one of them departs. So how did Jehovah choose to give this detailed direction of when each section of the camp should move? He used imperfect human representatives, the sons of Aaron. Now, this is interesting because we talked about earlier, there was a miraculous pillar of cloud. Could Jehovah have used a miracle to directly indicate when each section of the camp should move? Well, certainly Jehovah could have done that. But Jehovah chose to direct that imperfect humans be involved in giving that direction. What does that remind us of? Today, Jehovah chooses to use imperfect humans to provide direction to his people. The governing body, imperfect men that Jehovah is using, all elders are spirit anointed. Jehovah trusts them, so we want to trust them as well. So what have we learned from the example of the camp of Israel? When we receive direction difficult to understand, let's remember that Jehovah provides evidence that he's leading his people. Trust that the direction, even if we don't know the reasons, must be for our benefit to obey. What about the timing? If the timing seems inconvenient, things are happening too fast or too slow, we trust Jehovah's timing is always for the best. And if we receive pointed counsel from someone we know very well, even if that brother has imperfections we're aware of, Jehovah trusts him and we want to trust him as well. When we obey those taking the lead, we're demonstrating obedience to Jehovah. And just as the Israelites needed to obey to get into the promised land, our relationship with Jehovah depends on our trusting and following the channel he is using today.
Thank you, Andrew. That was very nicely covered. Good coverage of the material. We like that you right up front let us know what personal application we were looking for as you went through it. Thank you very much. So our group here now has been digging around in these two chapters in Numbers, and we're going to see what gems they found. We're going to do that by means of Brother Andre Means.
Well, we have entered our digging for spiritual gems portion, and brothers and sisters, we're looking forward to hearing your comments, 30 seconds or less, on what you've learned from this week's Bible reading. Well, to get our discussion underway, may we have a reader for Numbers chapter 9 and verse 13, please. Let's see, the Harris family, please.
But if a man was clean or was not off on a journey and neglected to prepare the Passover sacrifice, that person must then be cut off from his people, because he did not present the offering of Jehovah at its appointed time. That man will answer for his sin.
Thank you. What lesson can Christians learn from this direction to Israel? Brother Walls, please.
Well, it's a powerful lesson. First of all, how important it is never to neglect any arrangement that Jehovah has established. Now, we follow the principle. So we are admonished to meet regularly, and we do so with our congregations, and we want to continue to support those arrangements, showing respect and love for Jehovah's directions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Perhaps we move on to our next question. What spiritual gems from this week's Bible reading would you like to share regarding Jehovah, the field ministry, or something else? Sister Walls, please.
In Numbers chapter 9, verses 6-8, we have the example of the chieftains who come up to Moses, questioning about whether they could celebrate the Passover since they were ceremonially unclean. I appreciate very much Moses' example of not presuming to know Jehovah's feelings on the matter. Instead, in verse 8, Moses said to them, "Wait there and let me hear what Jehovah may command regarding you." So he sets an excellent example, not only for elders, but for all of us if we're asked to give advice or any counsel.
Thank you. The Bridges family, please.
Yes, with regard to Numbers 9:17-22, the question is good for us to consider. How do we react when we receive divine direction? Do we, like the Israelites of Moses' day, try to apply this divine direction promptly right afterward? Or do we continue to do things just as we've been accustomed to doing them? Are we familiar with up-to-date directions such as those regarding the conducting of home Bible studies, preaching to foreign-speaking people, or even with regard to our Kingdom Hall congregation consolidation? So, the faithful Israelites who responded to God's direction did reach the promised land. Likewise, God's faithful people today will without fail reach the promised new world. However, whether or not we're personally there depends on our being humble and willing to follow God's direction. So therefore, may we all keep on discerning the evidence of Jehovah's guidance.
Thank you very much. Sister Hudson, please.
In Numbers 9:5 says, according to all that Jehovah had commanded Moses, so the Israelites did. That reminds me of Noah, who did just so when given detailed instructions to build the ark. In both cases, I'm encouraged that Jehovah had worked out the details. His servants were only asked to obey the instructions. When they did that, according to verse 23, they kept their obligation to Jehovah.
Thank you. Brother Gilson, please.
I appreciated Numbers chapter 10 and verse 32 because it reminded me of the responsibility I have as a representative of Jehovah. Because Moses appealed to Hobab with Jehovah's goodness, but he said, whatever goodness Jehovah shows to us, we will surely show to you. So he was saying that they would be a good representative of who Jehovah was as a ruler, as a God, and as our Father. So in the ministry, I want to do the same and continue to be a good representative of who he is.
Thank you very much. Sister Harris, please.
I appreciate it. In Numbers chapter 10, we see in verse 30, Hobab said, I will return to my own country and to my relatives. But after Moses petitioned him to join them in the wilderness, we see he changed his mind. So I appreciated that Hobab forsook the opportunity to return back home to his relatives and country to help Moses and Jehovah's people. And we see many missionaries and need graders and those in full-time service also have shown the same willing attitude and have sacrificed being at home and with their family in order to further the good news.
Thank you very much. Sister Ponce, please.
In Numbers 9, it speaks of how when Jehovah's cloud moved, so did the camp. And as long as they followed that cloud, the Israelites felt Jehovah's protection in the wilderness. Well, today we live in a wilderness, the wilderness of Satan's world, but we're not alone. We have Jehovah's chariot, and as it moves and makes adjustments, so do we. Though we can't see that chariot, we do see his visible organization, and it is protecting us spiritually and physically in this wilderness of Satan's world.
Thank you very much. The Walls family, please.
It's noteworthy that in Numbers chapter 9, verses 18 through 23, it describes the camp breaking and setting and moving up for Israel. And 7 times we find the expression at the order of Jehovah. And Insight Volume just comments that 7 often signifies completeness in the scriptures. So we learn at least that the nation, when they were cooperative completely with Jehovah's direction, they received his blessings. We're encouraged to do the same thing today, to move at the order of Jehovah.
Thank you. Brother Shook, please.
In Numbers 9:3, we read about preparing the Passover sacrifice at the appointed time. It was to be done at twilight, literally between the 2 evenings. And we understand that to mean after sunset at the beginning of Nisan 14, before it was completely dark. Modern Jews follow the rabbinical view that the lamb was to be sacrificed as the sun began to set on Nisan 14. So as a result, when they eat the lamb after sunset, it's actually Nisan 15. And it's one of the reasons that the memorial date can differ from the modern Passover. But the governing body follows the ancient method, so we can be confident that we observe the memorial at the appointed time.
Thank you. Brother Ponce, please.
In Numbers 10:4, when the priest would just blow one trumpet, it meant that only the chieftains would appear at the tent of meeting. While there, they were receiving information and training from Moses so that it would help them care for their responsibilities. And as elders, we do our best in shepherding the flock, and so we readily respond when we are called for additional training, such as Kingdom Ministry School. And during these sessions, we learn how to be more effective in caring for the congregation matters.
Thank you very much. The Soma household, please.
In Numbers chapter 9, verse 14, at the end, it says, there should exist one statute for you, both for the foreign resident and for the native one of the land. So today, regardless of where you live or where you come from, or whether you're hope is earthly or heavenly, there's one set of standards from God to live by. And that is such a blessing, and it adds such peace and unity to all our congregations.
Thank you. The Bridges household, please.
In chapter 10, verse 13, it mentions this is the first time they pulled out. So under the new direction, this was their absolute first opportunity. Would there be any problems? Would there be a little miscommunication, a little bit of mistakes? Probably. Was it absolutely smooth? Not very likely, but the Bible doesn't give any comments about how it flowed, except for the fact that in verse 33, it says, so they began marching. So today we've received lots of new direction, things we've never done before. We're doing Zoom, we're doing witnessing in different ways, and other mistakes. Is it always smooth? No, but because of cooperation and because of willing to be humble, this goes a long way into making everything successful.
Well, thank you. And we'd like to thank all of the participants for your meditation, your research, and your practical application. Truly, you all helped us to dig for spiritual gems. May we now give our attention to our chairman, please.
And isn't it impressive how many comments we get when we keep them brief? It's wonderful. And beautiful comments, beautiful gems you brought. And thank you, Andre, for heading up that part. You may have noticed too that this used to be called digging for spiritual gems, but we do that before we come to the meeting. So now it's just called spiritual gems since January. And we have a little more time to devote to that because since January, we just have one question where the research is supplied for us. So that's been a nice refinement. Now we're going to go to our Bible reading, and Brother Bridges is going to handle that for us. So we're going to follow him along in Numbers chapter 10, and we'll start there in verse 17.
When the tabernacle was taken down, the sons of Gershon and the sons of Merari, who carried the tabernacle, departed. When the three-tribe division of the camp of Reuben departed by their companies, and Elizur, the son of Shadur, was over its company. Over the company of the tribe of the sons of Simeon was Shelumiel, the son of Zurishaddai. Over the company of the tribe of the sons of Gad was Eliasaph, the son of Duel. Then the Kohathites, who carried the sanctuary items, departed. The tabernacle was to be set up by the time they arrived. Then the three-tribe division of the camp of the sons of Ephraim departed by their companies. And Elishama, the son of Ammihud, was over its company. Over the company of the tribe of the sons of Manasseh was Gamaliel, the son of Peduzah. Over the company of the tribe of the sons of Benjamin was Abidan, the son of Gideoni. Then the three-tribe division of the camp of the sons of Dan departed by their companies, forming the rear guard for all the camps. And Ahiezer, the son of Ammishaddai, was over its company. Over the company of the tribe of the sons of Asher was Pagiel, the son of Ochran. Over the company of the tribe of the sons of Naphtali was Ahira, the son of Enan. This was the order of the departure that the Israelites and their companies followed when they would depart. Then Moses says to Hobab, the son of Ruel, the Midianite, the father-in-law of Moses, "We are setting out for the place about which Jehovah has said, 'I will give to you.' Do come with us, and we will treat you well, because Jehovah has promised good things for Israel." But he said to him, "I will not go. I will return to my own country and to my relatives." At this he said, "Please do not leave us, for you know where we should camp in the wilderness, and you can serve as our guide. And if you do come with us, whatever goodness Jehovah shows to us, we will surely show to you." So they began marching from the mountain of Jehovah for a journey of 3 days, and the ark of Jehovah's covenant traveled before them for the 3-day journey to search out a resting place for them. And Jehovah's cloud was over them by day when they set out from the encampment. Whenever the ark was moved, Moses would say, "Rise up, O Jehovah, let your enemies be scattered, and that those who hate you flee from before you." And when it would rest, he would say, "Do return, O Jehovah, to the countless thousands of Israel."
Thank you, Brother Bridges. I'll just mention that this is the type of Bible reading that brothers pray not to get when we have all those names. Wait till we get to Chronicles, it gets worse. And poor Brother Bridges got this with very little notice, so we're not even going to give him counsel for that. You notice he does what I have to do with some of these names. It's really, you just have to slow down to be able to handle those names because they're just not natural to us. Let me just mention one point. The point was going to be on accurate reading. Something that is not often mentioned, the booklet talks about that we don't want to enunciate so precisely that it becomes unnatural. We have the word departed in here 3 times. Departed has a T that we pronounce like a D, departed. If we started saying departed, then all of a sudden it sounds unnatural. So there's this balance between not too precise and not too casual. So that's a tough balance to get, but we appreciate when our brothers try hard, especially when there's all these difficult Hebrew names in there. Okay, so now we're going to go to our 3 students who are going to help us in our field ministry and specifically in connection with our memorial invitation. So Sister Shook is going to get us started with this, and she's going to be working with our sample conversation. She'll be assisted by Sister Sanj Soma. Please.
Hello, Miss Soma. My name is Dana, and I'm one of Jehovah's Witnesses from the local congregation. I'm calling to invite you and your family to a very important event, the commemoration of the death of Jesus Christ, that will be on Saturday, March 27th. It's something Jesus asked his followers to remember, and so on the anniversary of his death, more than 8 million people attend every year. In past years, we'd gather in person, but this year, to observe social distancing, the event's going to be virtual. I'd love to text or email you your personal copy of the invitation with the details if you'd like.
Well, Dana, that sounds very interesting. I didn't realize that Jesus asked his followers to do that. Please send me the information. This happens to be my landline, but I can give you my cell number. It's 331212.
Okay, actually, I'm going to send you 2 links. The first one's for that invitation, and the second one is going to be for a video, Remember Jesus' Death. It explains how what Jesus did affects our future and what you can expect to learn from that talk that will be given on the 27th. I just sent them. Let me know when the links come through.
Okay, 2 of them. Huh? Yeah, I got them both.
Good, great. So if you open the link that says you're welcome to attend, that's the details for the memorial event. And you'll see on there, it also mentions a talk that's the week before on Sunday, March 21st. It's also worldwide in connection with the death of Jesus. That's virtual as well, and you're welcome to attend it. And then the second link is the video. It's about 1.5 minutes. If you just click that link, it'll start the video. I think you'll find it very informative.
Oh, yeah, it's starting. Okay.
Good.
All right, let's see. Wow, that was very interesting. I think I might attend.
I am so glad. And you know, I've really enjoyed our conversation, Ms. Soma, but I know you weren't expecting my call. So I'd like to call again and we can discuss why Jesus had to die. Would there be any time this weekend that would be convenient for you?
Well, I'm usually home on Saturday afternoons.
Oh, good. That would work for me too. I'll try you around 2 o'clock. Does that sound good?
Wow, Dana, that sounds really good. Thank you.
I look forward to talking to you then, Ms. Soma.
Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you. Sister Shook was working on enthusiasm, and Dana is well aware that enthusiasm is not just about more volume or bigger gestures or bulging eyes. It comes from a deeper place. And so we get this proper level of enthusiasm when we fully understand the importance of our information. and this was very important information. We're trying to convey that to the person, and when we get that level of importance, then our enthusiasm is going to come across very naturally. It's going to be appropriate to the level. And so Dana certainly did a good job with that. Thank you. Now, Brother Gilson is going to be inviting a schoolmate, Brother Irwin, to the memorial. Let's watch that.
Hey, Joel, how's it going? Do you have a quick moment?
Yeah, hey, what's up?
Yeah, class was a little interesting today, wasn't it?
Yeah, the teacher was really excited about that topic. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was nice. Well, regardless, actually, I wanted to talk to you about something else. I remember a while back, we had talked about the Bible and some of the amazing promises that it has in there. But I remember you thought they were a little too good to be true. And that's understandable. But I actually had something I wanted to, something that I think you'd be interested in, because every year we remember Jesus' death and what it did for us. And I think that it would be something very interesting to you, because that shows how those promises that we talked about can actually come true. So I have a scripture in the book of Matthew that talks about why Jesus died. If I send you that link, would you maybe be able to read that for us?
Yeah, sure. That sounds interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the link. And let me know when you get it.
Okay, you just got it. Yeah.
Okay, so if you scroll down to where it says 28, that's the one we want to read.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it says, just as the Son of Man came, not to be ministered to, but to minister and give his life as a ransom in exchange for many.
Okay, good. So where it says Son of Man, that's talking about Jesus. But did you notice why he actually came to earth?
Yeah, it says to minister and to give his life.
Yes, exactly. So that's the part that talks about his death. He gave his life for us. And so that's what will be explained at the memorial of Jesus Christ's death. That's actually coming up in a few weeks. So would I be able to, or you know what, I'll just send you the link to the memorial invite, and you can look it over, all the information's on it, and let me know if you have any questions. So I'll send that right now.
That sounds interesting. Yeah, please do.
And then, you know what, actually too, because of the fact that coronavirus is preventing a lot of people from meeting, we're actually holding this event virtually, just like class here on Zoom. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Just so you know what to expect. And then maybe next class, or next time we have a chance to get together, we could talk about how to show appreciation for Jesus' sacrifice. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that sounds great. And thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. And you know what, I'll let you go because I know you're a busy person. So we'll talk soon.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, you could almost guess that Brother Gilson was working on being conversational. He certainly was. And that's taken on greater importance now because we've moved from presentations to conversations. So we have to be conversational, especially with phone witnessing. We may have something written down and we're usually not looking at the person we're talking to. So then that can become a little bit of a challenge. So we have to really digest thoroughly what we're going to say and then put that in our own words. And there's this balance. We want to be comfortable and natural, but not too casual. And we want to be dignified, but not too stiff. And Tyler nailed it. You were right on that balance. So thank you very much for that. Now, Sister Curzon has the hardest one. She is going to tell her Bible student why she should not eat the bread.
Cher, I sent you an invitation. It's for the anniversary of Jesus' death. Did you receive it?
Yes, I actually have it right here. And I took a look at it and it looks like a pretty special event, Nicole.
It is, Cher. To see why, can you please open the invitation and read the first line in scripture?
Sure. On the night before he died, Jesus told his followers to commemorate his death. He said, "Keep doing this in remembrance of me." Keep doing what?
Well, that's a good question. Why don't we turn to Luke chapter 22 to see what he meant? Here, Jesus is gathered with his faithful apostles, and he knew that this would be the last time he would be with them before he died a sacrificial death later that day. So on this occasion, he takes the opportunity to establish what we now call the Lord's evening meal. Let's see how this took place. Would you please read verses 19 and 20?
Sure. Also, he took a loaf, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to them, saying, "This means my body, which is to be given in your behalf. Keep doing this in remembrance of me." Also, he did the same with the cup after they had had the evening meal, saying, "This cup means the new covenant by virtue of my blood, which is to be poured out in your behalf."
So we can see that Jesus used bread and wine as symbols. What did the bread represent?
His body.
And the wine?
His blood that was poured out.
Right. Now look again at verse 19. There's the quote we find in the invitation.
Oh yeah, keep doing this in remembrance of me.
So that's the request Jesus is making of all of us. Please continue to gather and have this meal to remember me. Imagine him personally asking you, Cher, will you keep doing this to remember me? I mean, how does that make you feel?
Pretty special, amazing, actually. Of course, I would say yes.
Well, that's why we loyally commemorate Jesus' death on the day that corresponds to the Jewish calendar day that he died, Nisan 14. And this year, that day falls on March 27th.
You know what? I would love to come.
Great. You know, a 45-minute talk will be given, and about halfway into the talk, the wine and the bread are presented. Now, since this is being done virtually this year, each household may have a glass of wine and a plate of bread somewhere next to them. However, very few people, if any, in our congregation will partake of these symbols.
Really? But why not?
Well, let's go back to verse 20. Did you see the expression, "This cup means the new covenant"? Do you know what a covenant is?
Is it like an agreement or a covenant between, or a promise between two people?
Exactly. So this covenant is between Jehovah and those he chooses to rule with Christ in heaven. And the book of Revelation explains that this number totals only 144,000 people. Now, this is really a small number compared to the great crowd of people who are going to live forever in a paradise earth. Only those who go to heaven to rule with Christ are part of this covenant and would partake of these symbols.
So, Nicole, just trying to get things straight. Are you saying that those who go to heaven are more special to God?
No, both groups are equally precious to him. Remember, he paid the same price for both groups, the life of his dear son. Cher, do you remember how you felt when you learned it was God's purpose for mankind to live forever on the earth?
Yes, you know what? I just kept thinking that makes so much sense. I remember saying that this felt right in my heart.
I remember you saying that too. No one loves us like Jehovah and Jesus. So even though we won't be partaking of the bread and the wine, observing them helps us to be personally involved, to feel that deep love that they have for us and the value that they put on our lives. You are very precious to them, Cher. And in time, we'll cover these subjects more thoroughly. But this gives you enough for now to be fully prepared to enjoy this year's anniversary of Jesus' death.
You know what? Thank you, Nicole. I'm actually pretty excited and looking forward to this event.
Oh, I'm so glad. And so is Jehovah and Jesus.
Nicely done, Nicole. That was a tough one. And you were working on being understandable. That's becoming even more of a challenge because more and more people are very disconnected even from simple scriptural concepts that we think about every day. So especially with a subject like this, the key to being understanding is to understand it fully ourselves. We say we own that subject. When we've got that in our mind, we can explain it then in what we would say is non-theocratese language, common language. So it's obvious you fully understood the point. You were able to help her understand it with simple terms. And I like the way you used your householder. At one point she said, let me get this straight. Now that gave you the opportunity to explain it in some other words. And so that was very well done. Thank you. Now, before we move on to other aspects of our Christian living, we're going to sing together song number 84, Reaching Out. So that's one of the ones that's hard to sing without moving. Now, Brother Gal Ponce is going to review some of the major and somewhat surprising changes that have taken place in Bethels around the world. Brother Ponce?
The main purpose of the many Bethel homes around the world is to support the preaching and teaching work. In the last few years, many changes have affected the worldwide Bethel family. Most recently, at the 2015 annual meeting, a thrilling announcement was made that further emphasized where the focus should be, not just for the Bethel family, but for all of us. After watching the following video, there will be an opportunity for you to answer the 4 questions on our meeting workbook. Let's watch the video together. Thank you to the technical directors. Without you, our meetings would not be possible, so we appreciate your help. Now there's an opportunity for many of you to share in the meeting, so we're going to ask the 4 questions. The first one, what announcement was made at the 2015 annual meeting, and what 2 reasons were given for the changes? Okay, let's start with Walls family.
The announcement that was made was that all of the construction work or projects that were happening at the time would either be postponed, adjusted, or canceled altogether. And they were going to take that time to review those projects and make that decision.
Thank you, Sister Walls. Sister Ponce?
If the governing body outlined, they had 2 objectives. One was making the best use of dedicated funds and ultimately giving greater emphasis on the preaching and teaching work.
Okay, thank you so much. Now let's move on to the second question. What announcements were made at Bethel and how have these been beneficial? Okay, let's listen to Brother Erwin.
So there was a number of changes made. One was reducing the Bethel family size, simplifying some of the arrangements, like having the Bethel family members do their own cleaning and perhaps cooking more of their own meals, and also some of the redesign in some projects that were coming up to make things simpler.
Yes, thank you very much. Brother Lachman?
This benefits the field because the field ministry is supported through the Bethel arrangement. The different departments at Bethel, like the service department, audio, video, translation, are producing material for the field. And if they are working more efficiently, well, they can better support the activity that all of us are doing in the ministry.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. Sister Hudson.
And it made an opportunity for many more commuters to be used.
Excellent. Very good. Brother Gilson?
And that opportunity came about because some other additional changes were in many places Bethelites were now caring for their own laundry with facilities in their personal rooms. And because of that reduction in personnel, it did open the opportunity for more remote volunteers and commuter Bethelites to carry out that work that previously required a permanent Bethelite.
And any comments on how those Bethelites that have been reassigned are doing in the field? And Brother Wells?
As was noted, those Bethelites are now making a significant impact in a positive way. They're doing well, and you can see the preaching work is benefiting as a result.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let's go to question number 3. How did the announcement affect the branch relocation project in Britain? Let's listen to the Bridges family.
Yes, when the announcement was made in 2015, plans were very well advanced with the Britain branch. So this meant that they needed to put the project on hold while new requirements were evaluated. And this led to a redesign and reduction in the scope of the project. For example, the Bethel kitchen and dining spaces became more compact as they were now largely preparing food for only one meal a day rather than 3.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Brother Shook.
Similarly, the design included spaces that were designed for multiple uses and that could be adjustable in a quick fashion so that it would be ready for whatever future needs came.
Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate those comments. Sister Asoma.
Also, there was no longer a central laundry. So the laundry is being handled by each individual in their room. So that also added up so that it gave us extra space.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Now, the last question, how do these adjustments give evidence that Jehovah is leading us? Here's an opportunity to apply it personally. Brother Latchman.
Well, Brother heard it quoted the scripture Philippians 1 verse 10 to make sure of the more important things, and the governing body's interest in focusing on activities that contribute the most to the spiritual welfare of Jehovah's people. We know that's Jehovah's will, to care for his people spiritually, and we see the governing body reflecting that in their doing their job well.
Mm-hmm. And Brother Means?
Well, we know that Jehovah is applying his own counsel at Philippians 1:10 to make sure the more important things. And he's reminded us through his word that the most important work to be done is the preaching work. So we see all these adjustments made with the organization. We see it as a direct reflection of Jehovah leading his organization.
Yes, excellent. Thank you for your comments. And we appreciate much the work that is being done in Bethel. And we can do much to support the work by always focusing on the most important work, which is the preaching work. Thank you so much again for your comments. And now let's give our attention to our chairman.
And thank you very much, Brother Ponce. We're going to stay on subject now, and Brother Patrick Walls has something further to share with us about Bethel. So, what's the main thing you learned from that? If you want to have a successful part, have kids in it. Now, Brother Rick Curzon is going to direct our continued study of our Pure Worship book.
Well, this week we began chapter 6 in the Pure Worship book entitled, "The End is Now Upon You." Sounds ominous, doesn't it? Well, who are the you facing their end? Well, page 62, you notice what it says there? Jehovah's prophetic judgments against Jerusalem. And we're going to see how those were fulfilled. Well, who are the you today? And what meaning does this have for us? Well, Brother Cook will give us a clue in the following introductory video. Let's pay attention. Well, our appetite is whetted for the material to come. But just a little significant point that we want to bring out. You might remember that last few weeks we've been focusing on Ezekiel chapter 8, and yet today we're going to begin focusing on chapter 7. So why are we going backward? Well, remember what Brother Splain said in the opening video for this publication. He said, rather than discussing the book of Ezekiel verse by verse, this book considers Ezekiel's prophecy topic by topic. So we've been considering the deplorable, detestable things that Jehovah's people got themselves involved in. But now this week, we're going to better appreciate why Ezekiel got involved in these assignments that what we're going to consider is pretty unusual. So let's give attention to what he did and how his actions have significance for us today. So we're happy to have Brother Tim Harris do our reading for today. So let's begin, Brother Tim, with paragraphs 1 and 2.
The news about the prophet Ezekiel's strange behavior spreads rapidly among the exiled Jews living in the land of Babylon. For a week, he had been sitting dazed and speechless among the exiles. But then he suddenly got up and shut himself in his house. Now, with his perplexed neighbors looking on, the prophet reappears, picks up a brick, puts it in front of him, and etches it with a drawing. Then, without uttering a word, Ezekiel begins to build a miniature wall. The spectators, no doubt growing in number, must have wondered, what does all of this mean? Only later would those Jewish exiles fully grasp that the prophet Ezekiel's puzzling behavior foretold the coming of a dreadful event that would express Jehovah God's righteous indignation. What was that event? How did it affect the ancient nation of Israel? What significance does it have for pure worshipers today?
So our A question, what puzzling behavior did Ezekiel engage in? And we have a picture that we can also perhaps bring into your comments. Brother Irwin.
Yeah, as the picture shows, he went in among the exiled Jews in Babylon, and he sat there dazed and speechless for a week, and then suddenly he shut himself in his house. And then here in the picture, it shows him, he's got this brick in front of him, he's etching a drawing on it, and then after that he builds a miniature wall. So all the Jews are around him observing, and they must be puzzled as to what he's doing.
Yes, good observation. Thank you for that. Brother Lechman.
I appreciate that. In the picture, we can see the different people going about their activities. This would have taken time, and they know that knowing Ezekiel as a prophet would have raised questions of what is the message? What's Jehovah trying to tell us? And we can see that in the picture. They're looking at him and wondering.
Yeah, very good. We appreciate the artwork the brothers provide for us there. And Brother Shook.
This was an elaborate process. For example, in chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, he was told to take that brick that he had drawn a city on, lay siege to it, then build a siege wall, then raise up siege ramparts against it, camps and battering rams. So it was going to be a very dramatic picture of something, and it would certainly get their attention.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. And the bridges, please.
There is an auxiliary scripture mentioned here, the paragraph Ezekiel 3:10 and 11, that it was where it tells us that Ezekiel was told to carry out his commission to preach whether people would listen or refuse to listen. And this should affect our view of ministry today, because the lives of people worldwide are now at stake. And for this reason, Jehovah has provided his message of salvation and commissioned us to carry out it to people, whether they hear or refuse to listen. So another thing too, if we have tender affection for other people like Jesus did, that will also help us to carry out this commission to preach.
Yes, very good. Now, we mentioned it was unusual. So it's one thing to etch, Jerusalem on a brick, but what other things were unusual surrounding this event that he was participating in? The Barnes, please. Oh, I'm sorry, the Hudsons, please.
Well, one thing was what led up to it. It said he was sitting in a daze for 7 days. So we realize we're in chapter 4, which follows the first 3 chapters. So he saw the vision of the chariot. He fell face down. He was helped up. He was given a scroll, given an assignment, told he would preach and they wouldn't listen. Then the Spirit carried him into the city. And that's when he finally got some rest and sat dazed for a week.
Yeah. So no doubt this got everybody's attention. But the B question, what did his actions foretell? Sister Ponce.
Well, though his actions may have not made sense to those around him, they were going to fully make sense later, as Jehovah was using Ezekiel to foretell future events of how Jehovah would take action against the nation of Israel because of his righteous indignation.
Yeah, good. So somehow Jehovah had to get their attention, and what a way to do it. Jehovah does things in style, doesn't he? So our next subheading is in quotes from the Bible: take a brick, take wheat, take a sharp sword. Let's see what that's all about in paragraphs 3 and 4.
In about 613 BCE, Jehovah instructed Ezekiel to demonstrate by signs 3 aspects of God's coming judgment against Jerusalem. They were the siege of the city, the suffering of its inhabitants, and the destruction of the city and its people. Let us consider these 3 aspects in more detail. The siege of Jerusalem. Jehovah told Ezekiel, Take a brick and put it in front of you. Lay siege to it. The brick represented the city of Jerusalem, while Ezekiel himself portrayed the Babylonian army as used by Jehovah. Ezekiel was also instructed to build a miniature wall, a siege rampart, and to make battering rams. He was then to place these around the brick. They represented the instruments of war that Jerusalem's enemies would use when surrounding the city and attacking it. To indicate the iron-like strength of the enemy soldiers, Ezekiel was to put an iron griddle or plate between himself and the city. He then set his face against the city. Those confrontational actions serve as a sign to the house of Israel that the unthinkable was about to happen. Jehovah would use an enemy army to lay siege to Jerusalem, the chief city of God's people, the location of God's temple.
All right, question. What three aspects of God's judgment did Ezekiel portray? Okay, Sister Curzan, please.
The siege of the city, the suffering of its inhabitants, and the destruction of the city and its people.
Yes, very good. Now, these unusual activities that the Bible book of Ezekiel records for us, did he do this in the backyard somewhere, kind of out of the public eye? What does this book help us to appreciate about his activity? Okay, the walls, please.
No, he did not do this under the cover of darkness or in a concealed location. Footnote highlights that because of what Jehovah mentioned specifically, that these things were to be done before their eyes, we can reasonably conclude that all of these reenactments or enactments were done in the full view of onlookers.
Yes, very good. So with that in mind, what kind of qualities do you think it took for Ezekiel to perform his ministry? And what do we learn from that for us today? The Bridges?
Well, it certainly took humility and courage on the part of Ezekiel to act out those two prophetic pantomimes. And that helps us to see that we need courage and humility in carrying out any God-given assignment we have today.
Yeah, for sure. And Brother Means.
It's one thing to be in your hometown in Jerusalem, praising Jehovah, teaching others about him, but you can tell that Ezekiel must have been a man of faith because he was far away from home in the public view of other people in an enemy nation, yet he did just so.
Thank you for that. Our B question, how did Ezekiel act out the siege of Jerusalem? The Bridges? Brother Dunn?
Well, this would test his craft ability and maybe his artistic ability a little bit. But it says that he would act as if he was the Babylonian army and then actually build a siege wall around this brick and then even make a little battering ram. And he would also, it says, he would also take this iron griddle, and he would have this in the picture of it. So we can imagine it was quite elaborate, his activities, this little demonstration.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let's actually read the account now that you were referring to. Ezekiel 4:1-3. Who'd like to read those verses for us? Okay, Brother Shook, please.
And you, son of man, take a brick and put it in front of you. Engrave on it a city, Jerusalem. Lay siege to it. Build a siege wall against it. Raise up a siege rampart against it. Set up camps against it and surround it with battering rams. Take an iron griddle and place it as an iron wall between you and the city. Then set your face against it, and it will be under siege. You are to besiege it. This is a sign to the house of Israel.
Thank you, Brother Brian. So what else do we want to perhaps highlight regarding Ezekiel's assignment, acting out this siege? Brother Latchman?
We also notice here that he was to set his face against the city, showing the confrontation by his actions.
Good, thank you. And Brother Shook?
So here he is in Babylon, surrounded by other exiles that had come from the same place. And they may have had some kind of hope that they'd go back someday. But he's setting up this picture that's going to let them know that the unthinkable is about to happen. Jerusalem, along with its temple, is about to be destroyed. So what a message that he was assigned to give.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Brother Ponce?
And also the very last sentence in verse 3, where he says, "This is a sign to the house of Israel." So after acting all of these things out, he understood what he meant. It was odd behavior, it was strange, but he understood where Jehovah was coming from.
Yes, very good. Thank you for those comments. Let's move on to paragraph 5.
The suffering of Jerusalem's inhabitants. Jehovah ordered Ezekiel, take wheat, barley, broad beans, lentils, millet, and spelt, a type of wheat, and make them into bread, and weigh out and eat 20 shekels of food per day. Jehovah then explained, I am cutting off the food supply. In this scene, Ezekiel no longer represented the Babylonian army. Rather, he took on the role of the inhabitants of Jerusalem. The prophet's actions foretold that the coming siege would cause the food supplies in the city to dwindle. At that time, bread would be made from an odd mixture of ingredients, which indicated that the people would have to eat whatever they found. How severe would the starvation become? As if directly addressing the inhabitants of Jerusalem, Ezekiel said, fathers among you will eat their sons, and sons will eat their fathers. In the end, many would suffer because of the deadly arrows of famine, and the people would waste away.
Describe how Ezekiel portrayed what would happen to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Brother Irwin, please.
So Ezekiel made some bread out of this odd mixture of ingredients, and he was just showing how that the Israelites would be suffering from a famine. They'd have to search around and eat whatever they could, and and that's what's signified by the mixture of odd ingredients for the bread, and because Jehovah said, "I will be cutting off the food supply."
Yes, thank you. And Sister Hudson?
And they were to ration themselves 20 shekels of this bread a day, which was about 7 ounces. And that would be a starvation diet for them.
Yes. Sister Shook, Dana.
And I did a little calculating to see how much bread would 7 ounces be. And of a small average slice, it would be about 3.5 slices. So they could only eat about 3 pieces of bread the whole day.
Thanks for doing the math for us. And the Bridges?
A little more on this food. In Ezekiel 4:12, Ezekiel was told to cook his food on a fire filled with human excrement or dung. And this was just horrifying to him. It was repugnant to him because this was something that as a priest he would never have done. So it's interesting how Jehovah didn't dismiss his feelings as irrational, but that he was really reasonable with him, and he allowed him to use cattle dung, which is a common source of fuel in many lands to this day.
Good. And Sister Soma?
Going back again to the starving diet, having just 7 ounces of bread, and they were only authorized 1/6 of a hin or a pint of water a day. You do that for 300 and some odd days, and you're going to be grossly emaciated. And so that's why they may have been prompted to not only eat their sons and their fathers, but the last statement says they were wasting away to the point they were shocking to look at.
Thanks for that, Sister Soma. And Brother Tim, please, Harris. Oh, it's Sister Sharon. Okay, let's hear from you, Sister Harris.
And just to add to what Sister Soma said, again in verse 16, it talked about the severity of the famine with fathers eating their sons and sons eating their fathers. But it spoke about it being as deadly arrows. So pretty much like daggers, it's the famine that they would face would waste them away.
Good. Now, we can't help but think about the parallels, what might happen in the future. And, our minds can go a lot of different places with what the Great Tribulation might bring. But with Ezekiel here, or any of the faithful ones who are still serving Jehovah, what can we learn from their spirit that they showed despite this very ominous prophecy? Okay, the walls, please.
Well, it was clear that the faithful ones still exercised confidence in Jehovah, in spite, as you mentioned, of the ominous or foreboding prophecy, and that was certain to come and befall not only the inhabitants, but they would be infected as well. But their confidence was unshakable, and as a result, Jehovah blessed them.
Yes, for sure. Very good. Let's move on to paragraph 6.
The destruction of Jerusalem and its people. In this part of the prophetic enactment, Ezekiel acted out 2 roles at the same time. First, Ezekiel acted out what Jehovah would do. Jehovah told him, "Take a sharp sword for yourself to use as a barber's razor." Ezekiel's hand that wielded the sword portrayed the hand of Jehovah, his judgment, as expressed through Babylon's army. Second, Ezekiel acted out what the Jews would go through. Jehovah said to him, "Shave your head and your beard." The shaving of Ezekiel's head represented how the Jews would be attacked and wiped out. Furthermore, the command to take scales to weigh and divide the hair into portions implied that Jehovah's judgment against Jerusalem would be carried out not haphazardly, but deliberately and thoroughly.
Very good. Read scripture. Let's look that up together, please. Ezekiel 5:1 and 2. And who'd like to read those 2 verses for us? Okay, Brother Tyler Gilson.
Ezekiel 5:1 and 2 says, "As for you, son of man, take a sharp sword for yourself to use as a barber's razor. Shave your head and your beard, and then take scales to weigh and divide the hair into portions. You will burn 1/3 of it in a fire inside the city when the days of the siege are completed. Then you will take another 1/3 and strike it with the sword all around the city. And the last 1/3 you will scatter to the wind, and I will draw a sword to chase after them."
Thank you, my brother. So our A question, what 2 roles did Ezekiel act out at the same time? Okay. The Walls, please. Sister Walls.
First, Ezekiel acted out what Jehovah would do, using a sharp sword to execute judgment against his people. And secondly, he acted out what the Jews would go through once his head and beard were shaved, or in other words, they would be attacked and wiped out.
Very good. Thank you. And Sister Ponce, Debbie.
Yes, these 2 actions were very shocking, one would think, and it's nice to know and have this interpretation. I really appreciated how it is explained in such a way that we can see, because of course to the spectators it might have been puzzling, but how we can see how it applied.
Yes, thank you. Our B question, what is indicated by God's command to weigh and divide the hair? Brother Flatchman.
Well, this measuring process showed that Jehovah's judgment would be carried out deliberately and thoroughly. So it was an ominous warning.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And Sister Ponce? Oh, okay. Your hand was up. Take it down there. And let's go with Brother Shook, please.
And even though it would seem so complete and so sudden, it was not going to be carried out haphazardly. Jehovah would be in control, and this began a series of other details about what would happen to this hair that was shaved.
Thank you. And Brother Means.
And that would be really encouraging for the faithful, knowing that this great destruction is coming, but it's because of the detestable actions. Well, if Jehovah would notice the detestable actions of individuals, he will also notice the acts of faithfulness too. So this will also be very encouraging for the faithful.
Very good. And we can almost jump to the application with a lot of these things as well, but we're going to be getting into that as we get into the conclusion of the chapter. But one thing we want to have in mind is we did go and discuss that picture a little bit. No doubt these different activities that Ezekiel was engaged in, it drew a lot of attention from the neighbors and from those who were watching on. But we want to have in mind too the application, because there's another picture coming up in our lesson in the weeks to come, and we're going to see how we can make application to our ministry today. So, but thank you all for your fine comments, and Brother Harris for your fine reading as well. So what have we learned? Well, like Ezekiel, the message we carry may seem strange to those who hear it, but it is sure to come. So may this give us confidence and help us to carry out our ministry with humility and with boldness, knowing that Jehovah is backing our work.